My name is Elliott Greenblott. I'm the coordinator for AARP's Fraud Watch network in the state of Vermont. But some people call me Mr. Scammer because for the past 7 years, this has been basically what I've been doing, bringing the message about fraud and scams to the people of New England. Today, we're going to look at one of the major areas that affects most people today, and we call it fraud, scams, and con artists coming to a computer near you. Today, we dig into what is probably one of the most common areas of fraud in the United States. One benefit of the pandemic is that it brought a number of people to actually use computers for the first time in their lives and to use them for communications. But it also created a problem. As they adopted this new technology, they didn't become well versed in computers. Instead, they learned how to operate specific applications, things like Facebook, or checking Google for stories and events, or just some regular newspaper articles that they may want to follow. Beyond learning those few applications, most people basically didn't learn about computers, and that made them vulnerable to being a victim of fraud by very sophisticated and organized criminals. Again, today we are looking at fraud, scams, and con artists coming to a computer near you. In looking at computers and fraud, we need to know a few things. First, why are computers being used as a means to commit fraud? Secondly, how does it happen? Are there clues that you can look for that will inform you that you're actually dealing with a scam? And what actions can you take in order to be better prepared? Now, there's some things we generally believe. One of those is that because I might be well educated, then I'm too smart to be scammed. The second thing, for the most part, there's a belief that scammers target the elderly and the most vulnerable, and that's really where they impact with their efforts. And as a result, a lot of people who aren't elderly or vulnerable don't feel that they're going to be a target. Thirdly, many people feel it's not worth reporting scams or a scam attempt. The person doing those things may not even get caught, so why bother? A fourth reason why we think there are issues with reporting or with dealing with scams is that if you admit that you were a victim of a scam, your friends, your neighbors, people around you might think that you aren't very smart. And then the fifth reason a lot of people don't report scams is they tend to believe that reporting a scam is a waste of time. Nothing's going to happen, so why should I bother reporting it? But let's look at what the realities are. First of all, that thought that I'm too smart to be scammed needs to be dismissed very quickly. Scammers are skilled, capable, and very well educated. And regardless of what the accent is on the telephone or what the misspellings are maybe in a text or an email, these are very capable, very intelligent people, and we can't underestimate that. Scammers will target anyone. They don't just look at the elderly. They look at everybody who has any assets at all and hope that they can convince them to basically give them money. So anyone who they can benefit from, that's a target. Reporting scams is important. It's important because you inform law enforcement, and law enforcement can then issue alerts or be more aware of what's happening. Another thing that we need to believe is that admitting that you fell victim to a scam does not make you look stupid. It actually helps your friends and your neighbors be more aware of what's happening around them so that they're better equipped to deal with it. And then finally, reporting scams, reporting losses can also help others, can help people avoid becoming victims of fraud. Why is computer fraud attractive to criminals? A number of reasons, but if you think back a number of years, computers were actually not something that the average American would have. I started working on computers in 1980. It was a mainframe computer in a nicely air-conditioned room, so I didn't have to worry about sweltering and 90-degree temperatures, and not any average person would have one of those. Computers were not considered to be an average item found in the house. Today, computers are commodity items. They're not luxuries. So as much as somebody may have a widescreen television or a microwave oven for that matter, they're also likely to have a computer. It's easy and inexpensive to acquire a computer. Most people who have computers have not put out a great amount of money to get them. In addition, they may have received the computer as a hand-me-down from a member of the family or even a neighbor. So they're relatively easy to acquire, and even if you go into a typical store that sells electronics, you can find very inexpensive computers for approximately $100. Another problem in terms of the rationale for computer fraud is that the criminals realize that most people using computers today are pretty naive. They haven't learned how to use a computer. Again, they've learned how to use specific applications on the computer. But as far as how the computer operates, how viruses get into a computer, what to do when you have a virus, they're really not certain of that sort of information. The pandemic created a captive audience. As people met face-to-face less and less over the past 2 years, people adopted technology as one way to meet that void. And as a result, they were sitting at their computers or their tablets and communicating that way, which made them, as I said, a captive audience. And the information necessary for an individual to be scammed is readily available online to anybody who has the time, the money, or the effort to find it. Here's a quick example of that situation.
Dag Fien. Dus kan je voelen? Voilà. Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja.
Insecten.
Dat blieft?
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenie?
Zo hè.
Een moto. Oranje.
Pats erop.
Zenit.
Oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de... Met wie?
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
Die vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Une maison rouge, balcon blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So now that you've seen what happens as people begin to use computers and find out that the information about them is readily available, what information is actually out there? Well, let's take a look at some of the items. First of all, demographics. Finding out about an individual's race, their age, their gender, their religion, their marital status, their family, their education, their employment, all of that information is relatively easy to access online. Another thing is an individual's address. Quite often you can simply type in a search line with a person's name and find their address popping up as well. So current address, previous addresses, all available on the internet today. Personal data. What licenses do you have? What criminal record might be there? Do you have mortgages? Do you own property? Do you have social connections with particular groups, religious organizations? That information can be found online. Photographs. Photographs of you, your family, your home. So when you take all of this together, you have a treasure trove of information, and there is much, much more that is available. Computer fraud is committed in a number of different ways. First of all, email messages. We're seeing a great increase today in the number of fraudulent email messages that are sent out to people. The email messages contain various different threats or prizes or almost any kind of message, and it's a message that's geared to provoke a reaction from the person receiving it. The second area on computers that criminals have been taking advantage of is the creation of imposter websites. They create a website, request information from the person who's looking at that website, which is called phishing, taking information, personally identifiable information, and using that. So imposter websites. A third area, pop-up windows. Most people who are using computers will find that suddenly a window, a new screen pops up on their computer, and it provides either information or an offer, and often has what's called a hot link, or a place to click and end up receiving more information or being transferred to a different website. And finally, Trojan horses, where somebody does click on one of those links, and rather than give them something, it provides the criminal an opportunity to place malware on a computer. A couple other ways that criminals are able to use computers to get the information they're looking for. Trolling, in other words, following an individual, highlighting that individual and seeking any information they can find on that person, or just simply browsing, checking out the local newspapers, checking out social media, and then using that information to target people who are using those media. And then finally, social media. So with all of those areas, we kind of have a picture of what the criminal is doing. The typical criminal is going to be collecting information, taking that information and sorting it, basically, and then using that information to try and either get more information out of a potential victim or try to get money from that person. All of this amounts to something we call social engineering, and it's manipulating people to do things that basically they wouldn't normally do. If a social engineering effort is successful, you will end up doing things such as paying sums of money to somebody you don't know who you met on a computer. That's the type of effort that social engineering promotes. Scammers are successful for a number of reasons. Scammers are professionals. We can't overstate that. You know, folks in the military always say, don't underestimate your enemy. Well, if the scammer is our enemy, we can't underestimate the fact that they are criminals and that they are professionals. They are also students of psychology. A scammer understands how he or she operates. They also understand how you operate. And as a result, they know how to get into your head. Scammers have time on their side. For the most part, scams are not instant rewards to the criminal. They can take several months in order to play out, where the criminal will get to know somebody, get to know how they think, share information with them, usually on the criminal side it's false information, and receive information so that over time they build a relationship. There is a particular psychology to scamming and scams. It involves some very clear emotions and activities. Number one is fear and anxiety. If the criminal can place fear or anxiety in an individual, that person ends up being less than rational and reasonable in terms of their behaviors and actions. So by focusing on fear or anxiety, the criminal tries to take advantage of that emotional situation. Social consensus is a second area. In social consensus, the criminal is hoping that people will follow the herd. In other words, if you see other people investing in a particular product or buying a particular item, you're more likely to buy that same item or make that same investment based on what the people around you are doing. So if you're seeing close friends, relatives, people you know following a particular path, you don't want to be left behind. The third area is authority and credibility. We tend to follow authority very nicely. If somebody is wearing, for instance, a white lab coat, they look very official, and as a result, we think that person has authority, maybe we should listen to them. So by projecting that authority or projecting credibility, somebody that you know who's famous, who pushes a particular position or product, that lends more of the ability for us to say that's something we want to do or something we want to follow. Another item that pushes into the psychology of scams is scarcity. If something is in scarce supply, people end up panicking. I like to go back to the situation of probably 2 years ago when there was a scarcity in toilet paper. People were buying bundles of toilet paper thinking that the supply was very limited. And in reality, it wasn't. But that sensation or that feeling that it was scarce caused people to actually create that scarcity. So if an individual thinks that something is scarce, there's more likelihood for them to go for that item than to ignore it. Another thing that draws people to being a victim of scams is phantom riches. If I can dangle money in front of you, you will very likely react. And the hope is that if I can find the right amount of money, you will react the way I want you to. So for example, for some people, getting a letter from Publishers Clearinghouse saying you've won X millions of dollars, that's phantom riches because Publishers Clearinghouse doesn't notify its winners that way. But people don't know that. So as a result, that might be something to draw an individual into a scam. For others, it may be a smaller amount. It may be as little as $50, a $50 gift card. All you have to do is provide some information. If we take those things and put them all together, it becomes something that criminals refer to as the ether. And the ether is a heightened emotional state where the person who's being targeted for the scam or for whatever fraud is being conducted is emotional, not thinking clearly, excited, fearful, And as a result, they're in that never, never land that the criminals call the ether. Here's an example of beginner's luck. The quotation is, "I won $1 million in an online lottery. Just as I was entering my social security number and other requested information to transfer the money to my bank account, the computer froze." Beginner's luck. Again, phantom riches, the opportunity for $1 million, provide information such as social security number, and the victim becomes hooked by the criminal. Here's another example. This one is an email that was received. It is titled An Opportunity, and the letter reads, "I am Mr. Ibrahim Ahmed, Manager, Auditing and Accountancy Department, Bank of Africa, Burkina Faso. I got your email address by searching for a business-oriented personality, and you seem to be the one." Well, this goes on to offer $12.5 million to be shared. Pretty obvious that this is a scam. But again, there's no cost here to the criminal. They're using an email message. And if somebody does complete the form, which asks for name, full name, address, age, cell phone number, you've opened the door to a criminal. And providing that contact information, even if they get nothing more than that, has made this effort a success for them. Another example of impersonation is this email that I received. It's from Xfinity, or at least appears to be from Xfinity. It says, "Important information about my account." And there's a place to click. So I click on that spot, and it comes to a form that says Comcast on it. And it says Xfinity, my account, and then asks me for my username and for my password. And if you notice the email address, the URL, the address line of this, it doesn't even say Comcast or Xfinity. So that should be a clue that this is a fraudulent message. But let's say I fall for it and I click on the place that it says verify after putting in my password and my ID, and I get a new screen which says login now for latest mail experience. And it also says success, welcome to Xfinity Connect. So what has just happened is I got an email. The email said there was a problem with my Comcast account. All they wanted to do was see my Comcast username and my Comcast password. I put it in on the form. They're telling me everything's fine. I click again. It goes to the real Xfinity webpage. So in that process, I've given somebody access to my Xfinity account. What good does that do them? Well, a variety of different things can happen now. One thing that we've seen happen around the state of Vermont anyway is that these criminals have gone into individuals' emails. They've pulled the contact list from their email account. They end up sending scam letters to all the people on the contact list. And so suddenly someone gets an email that says, "Can you help me out?" And it appears to be from a friend of yours. How do they know about you and that friend? Because they've been able to take apart your email account. There is a safe way to handle that, and the best thing to do is to go into your account and then go into the settings. And once you've reached the settings, see if anybody has placed in the settings a forwarding email address. And if there is one, report that to law enforcement. If there isn't one, the best thing to do is to change your email password. that would make you a little safer from any scams taking place through your email address. It's okay, hon. It's just the bank asking me to verify some credit card info. That's called phishing, and that's what happened with that particular website that I displayed previously showing the Comcast Xfinity attempt. So what are the indicators? What are the things that show you whether a scam is underway? First item, is this too good to be true? If somebody's offering you a vast sum of money and they don't know who you are and it just happens to be random, that would classify as too good to be true. If somebody offers you a $100 gift card for answering 3 or 4 questions in a survey, that's too good to be true. Example of that, I always ask people to think, you've gotten that offer, $100, answer these survey questions. Have you ever walked outside a grocery store or a big box store and had somebody come up to you and say, I've got 4 questions for you. All you have to do is answer them and I'll give you $100. Now, if that has never happened to you face to face, it most likely is not going to happen to you on the internet. Another clue, poor spelling or grammar. We often see misspellings. We often see spellings that are not American English, but British English. And if you see those things, that's a good chance that the particular email or the particular website is a scam site. Major companies, the government, proofread the things that they produce. If you get an email and the reply to address on the email or the URL addresses in the email are unrelated, that's a scam. If the message conveys urgency and you get it in an email, odds are it's a scam. If there's an emergency or an urgent situation, you'll be contacted by phone for that. If you receive something that requests information of a personal nature, that quite often is going to be a scam. If it comes from a government agency, it most likely is because the U.S. government, state governments, do not operate with email as their primary approach to getting information. They will send you a USPS letter. And finally, if there's a click-on link for something that you didn't request, that's a good indicator that something is a scam. So let's take one quick look at an impersonation. Here's an example. It says Walmart gift card, get a $500 card. And it has the Walmart logo, it has the little smiley face, and it says, click here now. There's a lot of stuff printed on this, and most people wouldn't bother to look at it, but I did. And here's what that says. Underneath where it says click here now, it reads, Big Brand Gift Card Gift Program is not endorsed, sponsored by, or affiliated with Walmart Stores, Inc. Yet, the initial message says $500 Walmart gift card. So that should raise some, at least a little curiosity. Now that we've established a basis for computer scams, our next program will tackle the issue, now, what do I do? Thank you for joining Mr. Scammer, and stay tuned to the station for more news that informs you of the issues that impact your community.